In the name of Lord Jesus Christ, I speak here. All right, now we are on chapter 105. All right. I guess, to me, the main idea of the entire chapter, yes, is about the covenant that God has initiated with Abraham, right? That's why when you look at verse 8, right here, it says, he remembers his covenant forever, right? It does not change. Now, when you look at verse 42, again, he said he remembered his holy promise, and Abraham, his servant, right? Now, what is that covenant about? What is that holy promise? Now, when you look at verse 11, I guess that's the idea. To you, I will give the land of Canaan and the allotments of your inheritance, right? Now, in fact, you find that this is what God has spoken to Abraham about in the book of Genesis, after Abraham had been chosen by God, and was asked to come out of his own homeland, right, which obviously we know Abraham did accordingly. Okay, now, so to me, this is the key idea, and to tell us that no matter what happened, you see that the promise of God or the covenant that God has made with Abraham would always come to pass, right? So I think that is the main idea in this chapter. Now, it's like telling us that we need to have this faith in the promise of God, or in the covenant that God has made with us. Now, today we know that we have this new covenant with God, as stated in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31. And this covenant is stated twice in the book of Hebrews, right? Chapter 8 and chapter 10, right? So we find that in a way it also ties in to the covenants of Abraham as well, right? You know why? Because Paul says the covenant that God has started with Abraham will not be nullified by the law which came 400 years later, because he was talking about this in the book of Galatians, right? So, like saying to us that the covenant that God with Abraham actually, is now being, extended even to those who believe in Jesus Christ. Okay. All right. We look at, we're going to divide the chapter now. Now, I would say, verse 1 to verse 15, because this is part of the Psalms in First Chronicle chapter 16. Yes, and then the second part is from, I would say, 16 all the way to verse 25, and then 26 all the way to 41, and then 42 to 45. 1 to 15, 16 to 25, 26 all the way down to 41, and then 42 to 45. Okay, now we're going to look at this very closely. Now, from the first section, verse 1 to verse 6, we see that here it is talking about, again, as giving thanks to the Lord. And at the same time, in the course of giving thanks to the Lord, the wonderful deeds of God must be made known to the people, right? Now, so yes, we can sing to God, we can praise God with our voice, but what we need to also remember, making known God's deeds to his people is essential, all right? Is very important, for us to do. Now, that's why when you talk about passing down of faith, from one generation to another in the Old Testament scriptures, is purely about passing down the wondrous deed that God has done from one generation to another. In this case, like the covenant that God has initiated with Abraham. Now, when we look at the incidents of Moses, is the crossing of the Red Sea, right? And that must be passed down from one generation to another. Now, and also in this section, the people of God were urged, to talk about all his wondrous works, which we can see in the second part of verse 2. In fact, the problem with many of us, and in fact with many of our families, we do not normally talk about God's wondrous works. How often do we talk about God's work to our children? All right. And we find that even to talk to them once a week is burdensome. It's like they take this, this gathering together to listen to the wondrous work of God, it's like a burden, right? And sometimes you find that young children just want to run away from session of this nature because they don't feel like listening at all. But somehow, I guess we need to inculcate this spirit of or this desire, to know more about God's works, right? God's works. All right. Now, and also, and the members, the people are told to glorify in his name, right? And to seek the Lord, right? Seek the face of the Lord, seek the Lord and his strength. Now, I guess we also need to explain what seeking mean. What does it mean when you say you seek the Lord? All right. Now, since here is talking about quite a few times, when you look at verse 3, the last part, and then verse 4, and it mentioned twice as well. And what exactly do you think seeking God means? All right. Now, I want you to turn to Amos, yeah. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, yeah. Now, we look at verse 4 first. For thus says the Lord to the house of Israel, seek me and live. The meaning, seeking God has to do with the survival of our spiritual life as well. Now, verse 5, but do not seek Bethel, nor enter Gilgal, nor pass over to Beersheba, for Gilgal shall surely go into captivity, and Bethel shall come to nothing. Now, verse 6, seek the Lord and live. All right. And lest he break out like fire in the house of Joseph and devour it with no one to quench. Now, so if you look at verse 14, it says, seek good and not evil, that you may live. All right. So what does it mean to seek God? You seek God, and therefore you must cut yourself off with places of idolatry. This places mentioned here like Bethel, Gilgal, Beersheba, they had turned idolatrous, right? When you trace the history of these places, all right? Now, so therefore, the chosen people of God must sever ties, with these places. Now, instead, they must seek to do good, all right? And to establish, for example, justice in the gate, and whatever, all right? That's the meaning of seeking God, right? Now, so, that's why it's important, yeah? We said, make known his deed is quite easy to talk about, like, Exodus chapter 12, how God slaughtered the enemies, and you explain on that. But to talk about seeking God, you need the examples, for the audience, your audience to understand what you are talking about. Right? Otherwise, it become empty words. Seriously, what do you mean seeking God? I don't even understand. Okay, now, All right, now we're back to 105. He said, remember his marvelous work which he has done, his wonders and the judgment of his mouth. O seed of Abraham, his servant, you children of Jacob, his chosen ones. Now, so they must remember all the marvelous works, like in Genesis and in the book of what? Exodus as well, the five books of Moses, basically. Okay. Now, if we are the descendants of Abraham, right, if we are the children of Jacob, then obviously what? We all must listen, to, we all must remember, the wondrous work. Now, when you look at verse 6, you see that all seed of Abraham, his servant, there's singular. Can you see now? All right, now, and also later on, we said Jacob, you children of Jacob. We understand it refers to what? The community of faith, his chosen ones. Now, you find that if we said the seed here is a reference to Jesus Christ, in fact, it fits very well, to the gospel. Okay, because Jesus also listened to the Father. Whatever he spoke, is at the instruction of the Father, right? Now, so, in that sense, when Jesus was in this world, being a man, he was also required to wholeheartedly, follow what the Father has instructed him to do. Okay, now we come to verse 7. Verse 7. He is the Lord our God, his judgment are in all the earth. Right now, so his judgment is in all the earth. Now, I would say, the judgment here, apart from the judgment that we understand, is like, like the evil one shall be judged by God. That kind of judgment. Now, I also believe that judgment here refers, to the standard of God as well. Okay, and in all the earth, like we can see like the order in the universe, for example, the order that God has placed in this world. I mean, on the face of the earth. And also the order that he has set in his community. Okay. Now, so, and here God is not a forgetful God, he remembers his covenant forever. And it goes to show that God is unchanging. So, man is ever changing, but God is unchanging. And therefore, with that principle in mind, we have to, what is that? Hold on, again, I said, to what God has given to us and to the church. And it's not given to change. We must remember that. All right? It's important. We cannot use anything outside, the pattern of sound word and trying to superimpose upon it and saying that, it is justifiable to change the word. And that is not correct. That is definitely wrong. Okay, right? Now, we look at verse 9. Verse 8, the second part. The word which he commanded for 1,000 generations. Can you see? What is given to Abraham will also be valid for us today. It's unchanging. It's 1,000 of generation. Because God nature is such that he is unchanging. So whatever he has given, whatever he has spoken, shall always remain the same. Okay. Now, so here it says, the covenant that he has made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to Israel as an everlasting covenant. And what is that covenant? To inherit the land of Canaan. All right. Now, some people might argue, that today we don't inherit the physical land of Canaan. How do you explain, this statement here. Now you find that God is all wise. Yes, there is always a spiritual dimension, to the word that He has spoken, right? Now, for example, we talk about Zion. Yes, from the beginning is the physical Zion. When when David became the king, and what happened? He made Zion to be like the place, of his administration. All right, and later on you find that there is elevation from this earthly level to a spiritual level, to mean the people of God, as we can see in the book of Psalms and Isaiah as well, right? So today, when you talk about the land of Canaan, then obviously we are talking about the church, right? Now, you may question, how do you know? How can you be so certain? Right now, I just want you to look at one example. Yeah, we turn to Deuteronomy chapter 11. Now, I want you to read verse 11. Yeah? But the land which you cross over to possess is the land of hills and valley which drink water from the rain of heaven. The land for which the Lord your God cares, the eyes of the Lord your God are always on it, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Now, you find that this is the land that God has promised to be given to His people. Now, quite clearly, it's not just about a physical piece of land. Can you see now? Because it says, drink water from the rain of heaven. Now, when you look at this, verse 14, it said, then I will give you the rain for your land in the season, the early rain and the latter rain, and you may gather in your grain, your new wine, and your oil. Now, we know that there is a dimension, to the church. Okay, now we know that the early rain represents the first downpours. We said a prophecy, or we said this is a prefiguration of the coming of the church of God, right? And the 2 period of rain is stated here. We understand that is the early rain and the latter rain. Okay. Now, so when the Spirit came down, what happened? The church was established, and when the latter rain came, and the church again is established, as we have mentioned, the revival of the apostolic church. We are the true church, and we are the revival of the apostolic church. Right? Now, so when we take all this into account, we understand that it's not just talking about the land now. Now, today we find that the land of Israel, very likely, very soon, it will be conquered by all the Arabs. Right? But since there is an elevation, and we understand that, this is, the land that is concerned with the church, all right? So when you look at this in this way, then you know that His covenant, the covenant of God, is everlasting, right? And the land is everlasting. Okay, now historically speaking, when you look at from verse 12 onwards, initially there were few in number. Now, when you look at Jacob, after Jacob, was that? Jacob has met this who is that? His son, Joseph. How many of them actually went down to Egypt? Only 70 plus. Well, it's a very small number. A very small number. But this group of people later on came back. Is that also? To the land of Canaan in the time of Moses. All right. So that's why they came out from Egypt. Right? Now, so when you look at the verse 13, it said, when they went from one nation to another, from one kingdom to another people, He permitted no one to do them wrong. Yes, he rebuked kings for their sake, saying, do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm. All right. So verse 15, we don't see this during the time of Abraham to Jacob, for example. Yeah. But do you not see that Abraham actually was a prophet? Does not the Bible say that Abraham was a prophet? You did Genesis. Okay, where is it? You know the Abimelech incident? Chapter
20, verse 7.
Yes, that's the one. Yes. Now therefore restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die. Okay, now so you find that God did not allow anyone to harm Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right? Now, so these are the anointed ones of God. They are like the chosen ones of God. All right. Now, so verse 16, moreover, he called for a famine in the land. Now, this is the new section now. Yeah? It's just to help us understand, even though they have like gone down to Egypt, and you see that God still allowed them to come back, because when you look at verse 26, he sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen, and to bring them back. Okay, now that basically is the chapter, just to tell us how faithful God is to his covenant. All right, now, but I want to go through the example here with you, because I feel that the example of Joseph is a very important one, because there's always two aspects, two level, to the will of God. Now, so here it says he called for a famine in the land. It destroyed all the provision of bread. Now, so it's like what happened in the time of Joseph actually was orchestrated by God himself. Right? God is the one, right, who I would say who designed the whole thing and caused the whole thing to happen. All right. Now he sent a man before them. Sent a man before them who was sold as a slave. Now, so the story of Joseph was stated. Now, can you not see there are two levels? He sent a man before them. God allowed this to happen. Now, but on the earthly level, he was sold as a slave. Now, what does it tell us about? Sometimes you see that we may suffer tremendously in our work for God. All right. Just like Joseph, like he didn't even know what had happened to him. Why was he sold? He it's quite, we say it's quite alarming in a way. Okay. Now, but you see that that was intended by God, actually. Right? Two level, he was sent. That's why later on he understood very well, Joseph. After having comprehended the will of God, what happened? All the anguish, all the sorrow, were melted away because he has understood the will of God. Now, I think here it teaches us that, for the covenant or for the will of God to come to pass, at times it may not be easily understandable by us. But we have to keep faith in God and knowing that whatever he has said will surely come to pass. And that's the faith that we need to have, okay? Now, when you look at the story of Joseph, it's like they hurt his feet initially, of course, with feathers, and he was laid in irons. Now, he said, when did this happen? When he was put into prison, he's not put into a normal prison, he was put into a dungeon. Okay, now, we understand that a dungeon is very different from a prison, because a dungeon is for what? For top criminals, if I can put it this way, right? All these really bad guys, they will put it, Joseph was like considered as one of them. Now, so the king, and afterwards, when the time that his word came to pass, and the word of the Lord tested him, the king sent and released him, and the ruler of the people let him go free. Now, and he suddenly was promoted, on top of everyone, including Pharaoh. Like what I said before, if you have read Genesis very closely, we understand that Joseph was like a father to Pharaoh, right? Like a father. Now, so you find that he can do anything at will, right? At his pleasure, and he even taught his elders wisdom, which we do not see in the book of Genesis. Now, read verse 22, verse 21. He made him lord of his house. Whose house? King's house, and ruler of all his possessions. He was the one who has the final say over all things. Now, to bind his princes at his pleasure and teach his elders wisdom. Now, so eventually, when you look at verse 23, Israel, meaning Jacob, also came to Egypt, and he increased his people greatly and made them stronger than his enemy. He turned their hearts to hate his people, to deal craftily with his servant. Now, why did God allow that to happen? Because God wanted them to return to the promised land. And I think this is to tell us that, whatever God has promised will not fail, will surely come to pass. This is not just a historical story, just a story for the sake of telling a story, if you know what I'm saying, right? The intention is very clear because God is in control, and, we say God dictates history, right? And human history actually lies in the hands of God, all right? Now, so sometimes when we look at these passages, we take comfort. You see the world is so chaotic, the church is not in a good place, we said, but we know that God is in control, right? So what we need to have is to have faith in him, right? To have faith in the things that, God has done or God is going to do. Now, on our part, we need to continue to trust in him. Now, so verse 26 onwards, here the story of Moses and Aaron begins. And so how he performed signs and wonders in the land of Ham, and how the 10 plagues were stated here, and like he turned their waters into blood and killed their fish. We just take it for granted, these are miraculous signs. But you find that all this were done in order to make sure that the covenants of God, is fulfilled. Okay. Now it mentioned about the frogs, and how it entered into the chambers of the kings, and the flies, and the hails of rain, and how he struck their vines and also their fig trees and splintered the trees of their territories, everything, right? And you can find this actually in Exodus. Sometimes we wonder, why did the psalmist just repeat himself in a summarized way, right? In a summarized manner. Now, again, we said just to talk about one thing: God is faithful. He will keep his covenant. Right? Now, and also you find that he sent locusts. This is true, and add up all the vegetation, and finally he destroyed all the firstborn in the land. The first of all their strength. Now, so you remember when you study Exodus chapter 12, which I have gone through with you, saying that how these wondrous signs must be passed down from one generation to another. Okay. Now, you don't just tell the story, because in telling the story, the listeners must be able to grasp, the intended meaning of the story. That is to disclose, yes, the mighty power of God, and also to tell us about God's faithfulness. And his promise will come to pass. All right. Now, so you find that here it mentioned about verse 237, he also brought them out with silver and gold, and there was none feeble among his tribe. Egypt was glad when they departed, for the fear of them had fallen upon them. Right now, so verse 39, it talks about how God spread a cloud for covering and fire to give light in night, talking about the wandering in the desert. All right, wandering in the desert. Now, the people asked, and he brought quail, and he satisfied them with the bread of heavens. And this is what God has done, in the wilderness. And he also opened the flinty rock, and water came out to satisfy the thirst of the chosen people of God. Now we say, what is the purpose of telling us all this? All right. Now, but this is how they pass down their faith from one generation to another. Now, when you look at verse 42, for he remembered his holy promise and Abraham his servant, the faithfulness. Now, we need to understand this, that when we talk about history or the stories, if I can put it this way, of the chosen people of God, we need to understand that the stories of the chosen people of God contains what? The power of God in it, right? Now, yes, it may be stories, there may be stories, but when they are fully understood, you find that the story would generate the kind of power to keep the children of God, in the Lord, and will keep the children of God in such a way that they are willing to obey the commandments of God. Do not think that that the story in the Bible is not strong enough to help our children. I don't believe in that. If we said other sources outside Bible, are strong, how can I say, should be employed in the place of the Bible to help our children to know God, then I would say no. The main source of power must come from the Bible. All right, and nowadays people apply psychology or whatever, it's in the classroom setting. I said, okay, fine, right? These are not the main thing. You know what I'm saying? The main thing is still the Bible. Tell them story. Let them pray with their heart. Their faith will be built up. Guide them to do the right thing, not to sin against God. Don't follow the world. Their faith will be built up, not psychology. I'm not against psychology, all right? But to be honest, I would not apply psychology in teaching others. I just talk about the Bible. That's it. All right. Now, so sometimes you wonder when you read this psalm, what is the purpose? Just telling these stories, and not even complete stories. Some of the details I don't even know. I can't get it from this chapter. You understand what I'm saying, right? But the purpose is to tell us that God is faithful. You just need to bring out the idea that God is a faithful God, right? Now, all right. We look at verse 42 to verse 45. Verse 43. He brought out his people with joy, his chosen ones with gladness. He gave them the lands of the Gentiles, and they inherited the labor of the nation, that they might observe his statutes and keep his law. Now, you'll find that in order to enjoy the covenant of God, the promise that he has given to us, the duty of everyone is that they must observe God's law. That's it. And this is always the case. When you look at Exodus, for example, they have been taken out from the land of Egypt. And the next thing that God said to Moses to them is what? You observe my law. That is, I would say, that is menzol. Everyone must do that. Now, let's look at chapter 19 of Exodus, and look at it, chapter 19. Now, verse 4, verse 3, yeah? Okay. Now, and Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to who? To the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel. Right? And you find that by mentioning the house of Jacob, is like God is pointing it back to the covenant that he has made with Abraham. Right? Now, what must they do now? Look, verse 4, it said, you have seen what I did to the Egyptian and how I bore you on eagle's wing and brought you to myself. Now, what must they do? Follow God's way. Keep the commandments. You know, this is what we need to do as well. Tell our children, tell our members, you know, yes, you have received the grace of God now. Your sins have been forgiven in water baptism. Now, therefore, what should you do? Keep the words. Simple as that. There's no secret to it. All right? So, in fact, when you read some of the Psalms, and that is the intention of the psalmist, just to tell the people. Yeah, look at the history, you know, how faithful God is. And therefore, what must you do? Keep the law. That's it. To ensure that this covenant will continue with you. Okay, now we're back to 105, yeah? Right? So verse 45 is like, you know, the conclusion to the entire matter. Right, now we move on to 106 now, yeah? 106. 106 is a historical psalm. Again, is a historical psalm. Now, I just want you to look at some of the key verses, yeah? Now, verse 8, for example, nevertheless, he saved them for his name's sake, all right? Now, you find that God saved his people time and again, not because they are worthy to be saved. The reason for God to save them is because of his own name's sake. It's for his own name's sake. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah? Just like Moses said to God, if you were to destroy them, then the Gentile would laugh at you. It's like you cannot even save yourself, save your own people. Right? Cannot save your own people. Okay. Now, so I guess, yeah, this idea is quite important. You know, why that God has done all this. Yes? Yes, he loved us, but also because for his own glory. All right. Now, I guess, yeah, the next one is because the key character here is Moses. All right. The chapter has stated many times, yeah, what Moses has done. Okay. Now, I want you to look at, for example, in verse 16. It said what? When they envied Moses in the camp and Aaron, the saint of the Lord, the earth opened. All right, that's the Korah incident. Yeah, Moses. Now, when you look at verse 23, again, what? Moses is mentioned. Therefore, he said he would destroy them had not Moses, his chosen one, stood before him in the breach. Right? Then all of them would have been destroyed. Now, so the first part of the chapter, at least, is talking about Moses, all right? Moses. Now, you know, again, it's like they work their way back, you know, by talking about, no, sorry, it doesn't work their way back. Now, it's like talking about, what is that? Their sin. Sorry, I want you to read verse 32, just to, verse 32. They angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moses on account of them, because they rebelled against his spirit. So they spoke rashly with what? With his lips. Yeah, and here it talks about Moses' a failure, yeah, on this occasion, and because of what he said when he was provoked. Okay, now so you find that this chapter is talking about many things. It's like piecing many things together, but to tell us that, you know, God is a righteous God, and God is the one who saved. Right? Now, how righteous is he? He is righteous even to the extent that he rejected Moses from entering into the land of Canaan. Now, how gracious is he? And he was so gracious that, you know, when his people sinned against him so badly that, he he was still willing to help them. Now, we can look at the case in, where is it? Like in the incidents of like crossing, after they have crossed the Red Sea, wandering in the wilderness, how he time and again saved them. Okay, now, right? Like what we have mentioned in verse 8, there's the idea. This is how gracious God is, or how merciful he can be. But he was also very righteous at the same time. Moses was rejected. Okay. Okay, now I want to just briefly first divide the chapter here, the chapter. Verse 1 to verse 7, and then 8 to 15, yeah. And then 16 to 18, because this is not like stated in a chronological order, if you know what I'm saying. No, when they envy Moses, it should be later than when they made a calf in Horeb, is it also? Because verse 16 and 18 occurred in Numbers, but verse 19 occurs in Exodus chapter 32. So it's not in a chronological order. Okay, well, but okay, 16 to 18, and then 19 all the way to what? To 27, even to what? Okay, to 33, to 33, and then 34 all the way to 43, 34 all the way to 43, and 44 all the way down to 48. Okay, praise the Lord. Right now, we look at the first section. Yeah? Here it again talks about the mercy of God endures forever. Mercy in saving the people in spite of their sin against God, continuously. Now, I want you to look at verse 2 to verse 3. To me, this is so important. Who can utter the mighty acts of the Lord? Who can declare all his praise? Blessed are those who keep justice, and he who does righteousness at all times. Now, so it's like saying, only those who do justice and those who do righteousness, they are worthy, or they are qualified in a way to utter the mighty acts of the Lord. This is the same as the one we mentioned in Psalm chapter 50. Remember that? Okay, just to refresh your memory, I want you to go to chapter 50 and to take a look at this. Now, verse 16 is saying, but to the wicked, God says, what right have you to declare my statute or take my covenant in your mouth? You understand what I'm saying? So anyone who is not righteous, who is not just, in fact, in the eyes of God, he's not even worthy to talk about, the law of God. And that's the idea. So like in 106, you find that, here God is like saying, the psalmist is posing a question to the people at the time, and also to us who are right, who are qualified, who can utter the mighty acts of God. Only those who are just and those who are righteous. Is that okay? All right, now we move on. Yeah, we move on. Now, so here it says, remember me, O Lord, with the favor you have towards your people, or visit me with your salvation, that I may see the benefit of your chosen ones, that I may rejoice in the gladness of your nation, yet that I may glory with your inheritance. And again, you find that the psalmist here is so focused on seeing, the benefits of God's, the benefits that that God has and then is given to his chosen people. But that is the hearts, of the psalmist. Now, but when you look at verse 6 and verse 7, you say, oh, but we have sinned with our fathers, we have committed iniquity, we've done wickedly, right? And our father in Egypt did not understand your own wonders. They did not remember the multitude of your mercy, but rebelled by the sea, the Red Sea. Now, this is very similar to what we have read in Psalms chapter 78. Remember, the objectives of RE. Yeah, objective RE is in verse 7. Set your hope in God and not forget the works of God and keep the commandments. But very unfortunately, the Exodus generation had not set their hearts aright before God. That's the problem. Okay. Now, though that being the case, and you find that God still saved them for his name's sake, right? No, so he rebuilt the Red Sea. They complain, by the Red Sea, but God still saved them. God did not destroy them. Okay, and from the very beginning, you can see the love of God, towards his people. He saved them from the hand of him who hated them and redeemed them. And so again, it talks about now, and you find that initially when God loved them, there was not one of them left behind in Egypt. And in fact, this is a very good verse to talk about infant baptism as well, because crossing the Red Sea prefigures baptism. And did the people of God leave any of their children behind? None. Now, so verse 11 is the verse that we can use to support the idea of infant baptism. So infants within a believing family should be baptized and must be baptized. Okay, that's the idea. Just give me a minute. Yes, I think Psalms chapter 78 also mentioned this idea, but with, how can I say, with a different shade of meaning. Okay, now I want you to read verse 72, 78 verse 52. But he made his own people go forth like sheep and guided them in the wilderness like a flock, and he led them on safely so that they did not fear, but the sea overwhelmed their enemies. All right, so it's like saying, how God has guided his people. Obviously his own people include the young ones as well, not just the adults, right? The young one as well. Okay. Right now, the problems, when you look at this psalm is that the people are very forgetful. That's why the word forget is stated, or forgot is stated a few times. Now, for example, in verse 13, and then you look at verse 21, you see that they kept forgetting, God's works and what God has done for them. Now, you may question, how is it that they could so easily forget the works of God? Because the heart has not been set right. That's the main problem that we have seen in chapter 78. So today is the same here. Now, if we have seen, what God has done for us, how we have been saved from sin, right? How is it that we can so easily forget? Because our heart is not right. That's the main thing. That's the main problem. Okay. Now, so when they have forgotten the works of God, then obviously, they would do according to their desires rather than the will of God. So, and from verse 14 onwards, you see what they have done in the desert. It's like a summary of what they have done. Right? They lasted exceedingly in the wilderness, tested God in the desert. He gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul. All right? It's like the quail incident. They're asking for meat, right? And God slaughtered them all. And it's still in their mouth, and they were killed by God. All right? Now, because that's the reason why in our service to God, we have to ensure that our heart is right before God. We must always keep reminding us, God, please help us so that we are given a good heart. Our heart is right before you. And in this way, because we are right before God, and therefore we will not forget his deed. And whenever we think about his deed, and it would generate a kind of comfort and power within us. Right? Now, so a heart that is not right before God can never experience that kind of power from God. You and I all read the same Bible. We are taught the same truth. How is it that some of you are better than the others? You understand what I'm saying? It's all because of the heart. So you are here not only to learn, more about the Bible, but more importantly, we are all here to make our hearts better in the eyes of God. We have to make that clear in our heart. God, I want to be right in your heart, in your sight. If you have learned the Bible inside out, but if your heart is not right, you know nothing. Simple as that. The knowledge that you gain cannot save you. It's the hearts that matter. Of course, when you have set your hearts right, and all this knowledge, God will add unto you. Just like this Daniel. All this knowledge was given to him by God, 10 times wiser than all these people in the nation. Why? Because his heart was right before God. Simple as that. Okay, now verse 16 to verse 18. 16 to 18 talks about what? How they envied Moses. And the result is horrendous. And what happened? They were all swallowed up in Dathan. Right? Now, you see that, this again is because their heart is not right. Do you think their heart is right? And that whole lies. Right? Now, when you look at the numbers, it's quite scary, to be honest, because they are at least a multiple acts of rebellions against Moses and God. Okay. Now, for example, when you look at the chapter 12, is rebellions within his own family members, right? Went against Moses, but he kept quiet. That's the beauty, that Moses has shown. Right? He didn't argue with them, and God was the one who fought for him. Now, when you come to chapter 13 and 14, is the rebellions from the tribes, the leaders of each tribe, with the exception of two, Caleb and Joshua. They rebelled. Is it not true? Rebellion. Now, when you come to Numbers chapter 16, is the third rebellions recorded in Numbers. Who? The rebellions of Korah. Right? And even the son of Kohath and the son of Levite, with Dathan and Abiram, the son of Eliab, and the son of Peleth, and the son. All these are noble people that rebel against Moses. And Moses even prayed for them. Right? Now, so when you see rebellion in the church, it's because the heart is not right. Simple as that. If your heart is right, you will not rebel. And because you know that God is in control, you get what I'm saying, right? That is so important for us. Now, when you look at 19, back to Psalms 106, verse 19 to verse 23. Now, again, you find that here is like a mention about an incident that happened before the Korah rebellions. You know what I'm saying, right? Now, and the reason is to bring to our understanding that they have forgotten God, their Savior. Simple as that. Verse 21 is the key, and therefore what? They changed their glory into the image of an ox that eats grass. Right? Now, you see the Bible is very clear about that, And or you see that because the hearts of the people have not been cleansed totally from idolatry, and therefore this idea of this Egyptian idolatry was still very much alive in what? In their hearts. And therefore their hearts was not right. And when they saw that Moses was not there, and therefore almost instantly, they came out with the idea of building a calf, like attributing, all the power and glory to this golden calf, saying that, this is the guy who has brought us out of Egypt. It's quite unbelievable. Now, all right. Now you find that all these passages tell us about the heart's problem. Yeah, it's not the physical heart. It's the mind of the people. Now, and Moses, was an exceptional character here, because in both cases, when you look at how he was envied, he kept quiet, and in verse 23, how he prayed for them. And why? Because Moses's heart was right before God. He understood the hearts of God. That is the difference. Or he was misunderstood. He was fought against by his own family, by the tribes, the leaders of each tribe, and also by the noble people from Korah, and all this. And yet his heart remained strong, right before God. And so therefore he was able to pray for them, in a way that I don't think many of us can do anyway. If someone wanted to, let's say a group of people wanted to stone you to death because there was no water, and now they're trying to cause confusion again, do you think you want to pray for them? And God has already spoken to you, okay, forget about them. I'm going to make you to be a great nation. Forget about these people. Moses, I'm going to make you a strong nation. What will you do? Hey, hallelujah, praise the Lord. May the will of God be done. But Moses was different, because he clearly understood God. He knew God. That is, every time when we study the Bible, we should grow deeper into understanding the will of God, forget about our own interest. Our own interest is nothing. We just want the will of God to be done. Okay, now, when you look at verse 24 to 27, 24 to 27, you find that they despise, and the pleasant land. Why? Because they did not believe in his word. Now, why didn't they believe in his word? The heart problem. The heart is not right. No matter how you look at it, you have to refer it back to chapter 78, the objective, right? And if the heart is right with God, then you find that this thing would not have happened. Now, so even God, has decided to overthrow them in the wilderness, to overthrow their descendant among the nation and to scatter them in the land. All right. Now, what happened when you look at this chapter 20? Verse 28. The incident of Baal of Peor appear in Numbers chapter 25. All right, and they join in, to worship this idol. Obviously, Balaam was to be blamed as well. Now, again, if your heart was strong, if your heart is right before God, all this external influence will not be able to have any negative impact on you. But again, if your heart is not right before God, all these influences would be able to overwhelm you. Okay. Now, so, the strange thing is, they even add sacrifices made to the dead. If you verse 28, then this is what it said, offered to the dead. Does they provoke God? And has it not been Phinehas who stood and intervened? What happened? The plague of God would have destroyed all of them. And that was accounted to him for righteousness. At least there was someone who was righteous enough to stand up to do what? To stop the rot. We said to stop the rot, that's Phinehas. To all generation forever. Now, so you see that, these are just like bit and pieces of history in which is recorded, which are recorded in Exodus and Numbers, and that they are pieced together to illustrate one point. Heart was not right, and if there was no man there to stop them, what happened? They could have been destroyed. Now, it also tells us that if in the church, if we can find one or two workers who have a good heart, then the church will be different, right? Who really care for the church, who has the courage to stand up to stop the rot, then the church will be different. No, we are not saying that, this is done impulsively. You understand what I'm saying? And this is done with wisdom. With wisdom, all right? Now, so now you find that in verse 32, verse 33 is so what unfortunate for this Moses. You can see the degree of their sin, the degree of their provocation. Even Moses, being such an humble person, has fallen prey to this people. Now, again, I take this, this incident very seriously. In our service to God, we can be good, but we cannot be good all the time. So we have to be careful not to fall prey to the trick of Satan. Sometimes Satan may use people to trick us to sin against God while serving the Lord, right? So and because they rebelled against his spirit, and so that he spoke rashly with his lip, with his words, that he sinned. Okay. Now, obviously, there are different accounts given in the book of Numbers. In the book of Numbers is because Moses has not respected God. All right, respected God as given in chapter 20. Right. And here now, you rebel, must we bring water you out of this rock? And now, if you look at verse 12, and the Lord spoke to Moses, because you did not believe me to hallow me in the eyes of the Lord, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. So, because Moses did not believe in God, to honor the name. Now, when you look at chapter 27, I think it's also given the same account. Now, verse 14, it says, for in the wilderness of Zin, during the strife of the congregation, you rebel against my command to hallow me at the waters before their eyes, because they rebel. To rebel means not to respect, simple as that. Moses had fallen prey to that because of the people. All right, now, meaning we cannot afford to go against the will of God because we are provoked in our ministry, but this is something that we need to remember. Okay, very, very important lessons for us to understand. Okay, now I just want to quickly go through this. We're back to chapter 106, now verse 34. Now, what happened is, if you read the history of the chosen people, when you come to the book of Isaiah or Ezekiel, and you find that, and this is what they did not destroy the people concerning whom the Lord had committed them, because they were told what? They must destroy all the Canaanites. Is it also? When you look at the book of Joshua and the book of Judges, they were told to do that, but did they do that? No. Right? Now, it seems that physically or outwardly God was so cruel, but it was done with intention, because if they did not do that, there will be influence. Okay, now here the spiritual teaching is you cannot leave a leaven in you or a sin in you, because that sin will destroy you. Because sooner or later, the sin would take control over you. Now, likewise, if you allow people to influence you, bad companies or bad workers to influence you, sooner or later, you'll become leavened. Simple as that. Okay, that is the idea given here. Now, what happened is, when you look at verse 36, they served their idols, which became a snare to them. That was bad enough already. Now, when you look at verse 37, they even sacrificed their sons and daughters to demons. Can you see what harm they have done to the children? Right now, again, I can see this in our church today. If a worker has fallen prey, to the trick of Satan, the family also suffered. No matter how you look at it, the family will suffer as well, unless the family members are very, very strong. In most cases, I would say the family members will suffer. All right. Now, so they offer, the children or whatever, even shed innocent blood. And you can see this, yeah. I don't have time to turn to all the verses now. You can look up at Ezekiel chapter 16, for example, to read through that chapter to help you understand the extent of their sin. Or you can read up Jeremiah chapter 19 and chapter 32. You may pick out, you may be able to pick out verses on this. And also Isaiah chapter 57, or you have to read them yourself. Now, and they shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. That they were defiled by their own works and played the harlot by their own deeds. And that is the reason why God wanted to remove them altogether. Now, I want you to read this very carefully. When they're first chosen, there was special treasure in the eyes of God. Isn't it also? Okay, now, if you look at verse 40, what did God say here? Therefore, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against his people so that he abhorred his own inheritance. He hated them. Now, abhor is a very strong word. I tell you, when you talk about hate, maybe abhor is even stronger. All right? Now, and he gave them into the hand of the Gentiles, and those who hated them rule over them. The enemy also oppressed. Many times he delivered them, but they rebelled in their counsel and were brought low for their iniquity. Now, time and again, you find that, they did not respond correctly to the deliverance of God. Okay, now, verse 44 to verse 46, he regarded their affliction and God still listened to them. Because why? He remembered his covenant. Verse 45. He is a covenantal God, right? And that should be actually joined together with 105. And that is my belief when you read this part of the scriptures. But probably it's too long, right? That's why you cut it short, right? And divide the chapter into two. All right, now, he also made them to be pitied by all those who carried them away captive. That is the mercy of God towards them. All right, now, so when you look at verse 47 and 48, save us, O Lord, and amongst the Gentiles, give thanks to your holy name, and may the name of God be blessed from everlasting to everlasting. All right, so this is basically the love of God towards them, and God did not change. Right? God continued on. Okay, now, so this is the chapter. It's just history, but you need to be able to bring out or to look at the main points here. What is the writer trying to tell us? Right? And first is about the forgetfulness of the people. Why are they so forgetful? Heart was not right. Right? Now, the second thing is of the workers here mentioned. Now, without these great workers, many of them could have been destroyed long ago. Moses was one of them. Phinehas was the other. And also, you find that, when man does not follow God's words fully, they shall be influenced in a very negative way. Just like in this case here, they were told to destroy all the Canaanites, but they refused. And what happened? They suffered. They were led into idolatry, and not only that, the children were also killed by themselves, not by foreigners. And therefore, the entire land was polluted. Okay, so basically, this is the chapter. Yeah, right. We take a break.